This is a picture of, well, I should ask, any questions up to this point? Could all of you explain to me what what Baker's math is? Okay. Hearing nothing. I'm going to assume it's all a yes. So I'm going to start with a really exciting recipe. Now, I thought this was the absolutely first and only Egyptian bread recipe, but there was somebody in this group who said he had a recipe and read it. So there apparently is another bread recipe. And if you are here today, could you please raise your green hand? Okay, not seeing the green hand. Perhaps he's not here. The picture on the right, I took in a tomb in Luxor. These are gorgeous, gorgeous Egyptian breads. We have so many images of Egyptian breads. We have breads even that have been preserved in tombs, but we basically don't have any recipes except at least this one that I can tell you for sure that we have. And the story is that between the 15th and the 18th and 19th dynasty, so that's about 1300 BCE, a scribe named Meh, M-E-H, he writes to the scribe Ye, and he begins this letter in this incredibly flowery way. The scribe's Meh inquires after the scribe's Ye the younger in life, prosperity, and health, in the favor of Amun Rastgonther, and says, "What is your condition? How are you? What is your condition? Are you all right? I am all right. I say to Amun, Ptah, Pteh Harikti, and the gods, Lord of Pi Jahuti, may you be well, may you live, may you be in favor of Ptah, your good Lord, may you do things and may they be successful, and may you get credit for all you have done." It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. What happened to flowery language? What happened to it? Well, Ye is sending to May a manifest for a shipment of grain that his boss is sending down the Nile River, sending down the Nile River. And this is a list of mostly sacks of grain. So many sacks of emmer, so many sacks of this as flour, so many sacks of this as not flour, so many sacks of this, and so many sacks of that. It's all grain, grain, grain being shipped down the river. And weirdly, and amazingly, and fantastically, there's also a bread recipe. And this was noticed by a man named Barnes, who published this as the 3 hieratic texts from the collection of the Duke of Buckinghamshire, as I remember. And I'm going to read this to you. And what I need to also do is as you read this, I need to instill confidence in all of you that not understanding should not be an impediment to understanding. I think a lot of people get confused and flummoxed at historic bread recipes because they think they don't understand what the units of measure are. Whether you're right now a French person reading an early modern English recipe that's all in pounds and bushels and pecks and things you've never heard of before in your life, or whether you're, German and reading a French recipe, with boisseau and so on and so forth, or us right now reading this Egyptian recipe. You need to relax because internally, recipes are about the ratios of the ingredients that they're written in. So I'm going to work right now really just in Deben. A Deben weighs 91 grams, so it is something we can know, but we can work this out without knowing that a Deben is 91 grams. Delivered, so number 9 in the list, delivered therefrom in meal, making 383 Deben. And then this is some smaller unit of a Deben, a something 7.5. It is in terms of 383 Deben, which is like 45 kilos. We don't need to worry about fractions. So delivered therefrom in meal. So we've got whole meal, making 31 CKK loaves. We don't know the vowels in Egyptian, so hieroglyphics is just written that way. Each at 12 deben, making 370 deben. And the person notes, and Barnes puts a question mark, lost at one time 11 deben. So what has happened is that we start with 383 deben of flour, but we're going to end up with only 372 deben of dough. This dough is a mixture of flour and water. And what May realizes is 11 deben of flour is missing, and that's 2.8%. This flour had to be sifted. And what we know from even 18th century, from milling records, even 18th century mechanical milling records that the British Navy did for us as part of that work with those vaulting tables, is you're going to lose even then between 1.5% as the flour is being made. And this was not on a big fancy 18th century, late 18th century mechanical bolting station. You know, there's lots of people grinding by hand and sifting by hand, and you lose something. So even that detail is here, but that detail makes sense. What I want to emphasize is that a 2.8% loss in the sifting process is going to make sense. Now, if we're going to have 272 deben of dough, which is a mixture of flour and water, what you can do is just assume, just make a wild guess and say, well, I'm going to put in 50% water. So if there's 50% water in 372, what you're going to find, you're going to derive from that there's 248 deben of flour. And if you divide that 248 deben of flour by the 383 deben of meal, you're going to get a flour that's in around a 64% extraction rate. So that tells you this flour was sifted. That itself is a mind-boggling thing to be able to prove, because up to this point, there's been no confirmation that Egyptian bread was sifted, although they talk about sifting and we see sieves, so it made sense. This gives you the sense of the scale. And then delivered therefrom, as coming from the fire, 31 loaves. And it did say each loaf was 12 deben, 12 times 91. It essentially gives you a kilo loaf. So these breads went into the fire, whatever that means, weighing a kilo. And what's really great is they come out having lost about 10% of their weight. So this is a classic recipe. We have recipes written similar to this in the 1500s and early 1600s in England. They're telling us what you can make from a certain amount of meal, and that you're going to put it, it's going to be way less when it comes out of the fire than when it goes in. And I think that's a very important thing to note when we think about who wrote these recipes and what is the source of the recipe. Because if you were to ask your mother, this is back in the time when our mothers were making our household breads. If you were to go back in time and ask your mother, say, hey, Mom, how do you make bread? I think one thing she's not going to tell you is say, okay, dear, well, you're going to put the bread in, it's going to weigh a kilo when you put it into the oven, and it's going to weigh 900 grams when you get it out. Because for a home baker, that's not important. My thesis is that from this very, very, very early recipe, certainly not the first one written down, the Hittites, the Akkadians, the Egyptians, for sure they were writing down bread recipes, but they didn't survive. They didn't survive. The authors were getting these recipes from the baker, a baker, and not a woman baker, probably a male production baker. Remember, women made the bread at home. Men, those of us in the group who are us men, we were doing the work of production baking outside the home. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that the people writing these early cookbooks, because we're now going to get into the cookbook literature, they didn't bake. They were getting these recipes from people. They wrote down dictation, I think we're going to find. They copied recipes from manuscript books or other printed books, but they didn't really know whereof they spoke. It's sort of a miracle that the recipes came out as well as they did.